Hello everyone, I'm here to show you a brand new software. This is called Podcast Promoter. I'd like to start by asking you, what do the 650,000 podcasts in the United States have in common? The answer is they don't have any software specifically to promote themselves. If you're developing a podcast, it is very hard to promote yourself out there. And you can post on some social media and stuff like that, but nothing like what we're doing here. I want to go over this very quickly. We've got here in the podcast tab a way to quickly get thousands of podcasts. Now, the strategy here, okay, is to find podcasts that are very similar to yours and then to mine the followers of those podcasts and connect with them so that you can introduce them to your podcast. This podcast tab here is basically an iTunes scraper. What you can do here is you can select not just a category but a subcategory. In this case, management and marketing. You have a choice. You can get the top couple hundred podcasts, or you can do A to Z. By accessing this, you can connect with thousands, or find thousands, I should say, of podcasts that are in a specific niche, and then you can take a look and see which ones are what you would be interested in. We have their website. Sometimes we get their email, but that's not the primary function here. Primary function is to find them on Twitter or Instagram, or go directly to their podcast link. And so part of what you need to do when you're running this software is to find a very specific type of podcast that's very similar to yours. Once you do that, then we can go to Twitter and Instagram, and I'll show you how we can download the followers. If you are running a podcast, then you're probably already familiar with a site called Patreon. So Patreon is how a lot of podcasts monetize themselves. If you are just getting into podcasting and you're not sure how to monetize yourself, you want to go over to patreon.com and check it out. This is a very cool place. Now, what Patreon does is, as the name suggests, it coordinates patrons of a podcast, and it will show you in the grid here the title owner, how many patrons they have, and the price that they're making per month, which is very cool information. I don't know anywhere on the internet where you can get that kind of data except at Patreon. And so we can scrape the top 1,000 over at Patreon, and we can run a search and find a podcast that is very specific to ours. Now, once we find that, we can come over here and we can find, well, how much money are they making? So like last podcast on the left, which is a very, very popular podcast, is making $57,906 per month. So you've got X number of patrons, they're paying X number of dollars, and this is the total. This is really good information because we can figure out, well, hey, these are not only interested followers, they are followers that, they're very interested in the podcast, and they are willing to pay. So what we can do is we can go and we can get their Twitter link, and we can go over to the Twitter followers tab. We can input that here, click add, and then we've got the specific Twitter page. So from there, what we can do is we can set the number of followers that we want to download. Now, it just depends, on the podcast, but generally speaking, we're talking about downloading thousands of followers. So think about this. If you're a podcast owner and you want not just anybody, you want people that are willing to pay, you can go over to Patreon, find the Twitter link, and then download their followers right here. Once downloaded, then we can select at the rate of a couple hundred a day and follow them. As they connect, we can introduce them to our podcast. And so this is the modus operandi of how this operates, is we can target specific listeners of other podcasts that are very similar to ours, and then let them know about our podcast over and over and over again. We can tweet out regularly about our podcast, and same on Instagram. We can post on Instagram about our podcast and provide updates and communicate over and over and over with a very, very targeted audience. Now that's really cool. That's great, but it gets better, because watch this. What we can do is we can set the minimum followers that person has. Okay, so let's say that we only wanted to connect with people that are influencers. So we could set this to 10,000, and that would be the minimum number of followers that person would have to have before we even follow them. So we can connect with not just anybody, not somebody that has 20 followers or something, but extremely active, influential people that are the exact right kind of people for our podcast. This is what's interesting. So what else does that do? Well, it provides us with a network of people that allows us to be influential ourselves. So it's not just the fact that we're out there connecting and promoting our podcast, but we can actually become an influencer through the people that we are connected to on both Twitter and Instagram. So this will just continue to download and download and download. I'm going to stop it for the moment. I'm going to show you Instagram over here. I purposely left this blank, but we can just select one and set a download limit. Now I could set this to 10,000 or whatever. There's no real limit on downloading on Instagram. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start it. Okay, so I paused it for just a moment, and I paused it for about 15 seconds just as it was logging in. Over here at Instagram, we can do a massive download of the same kind of targeted people. So it doesn't show the followers here, it records them on outbound, meaning that when we follow them, we can still set the limit. So if we want people on Instagram that have 10,000 followers on Instagram before we follow them, or whatever we want to set it to, okay, we could set it to 500, we could set it to 20,000, whatever we want. We can then connect with only influencers if we want to on Instagram. So think about this for a moment. We can find the exact podcasts that are almost exactly like the one that we're doing. We can download their followers. We can target specific people on both Twitter and Instagram. Now I just set it to 300, but you see how fast it downloaded those. And then we can set the number of followers that they have to have before we even follow them. And then as we connect to them, we communicate by posting and tweeting, and we can message as well about our podcast. Now, if you think about this, can this be used for other things? Well, sure it can. Let's say for a moment that you're an author. Here, I'll show you here. So here's an author. His name's Jay Wilkinson. Now, he's an entrepreneur and an author, and he writes about a variety of things, but especially about entrepreneurism. And so I chose him just to illustrate the fact that this person has thousands of followers, and is a popular author. Now, let's say that you're an author and you are writing about the same thing. It's very simple for you to search on Twitter and get a page from an author that is in the same genre as you. What can we do with that? Well, again, we can come back to the podcast promoter, and we can go over to Twitter. We can paste the URL in there, or on Instagram, paste the URL in there, and we can download their followers, the people that are reading the books that this author has. So this, if you start following what I'm saying here, this podcast promoter is something that can be used many, many different ways. Yes, it can promote podcasts, but it can also promote you as an author or as a public speaker or anything else that you do in your business. You can find the exact right people for your business, download them, and then make sure that they're highly active, influential people. So what does that mean? That means you can become an influencer very quickly on almost any subject that you want. So this has a lot of uses over and above podcasting. Let me show you something else here. I'm going to go over to the YouTube commenter. So on YouTube, I'll show you the URL that I've got here. So what I did for testing purposes is I went to YouTube and I went to the Joe Rogan Experience where he's got Elon Musk here. And I just copy this URL, all right, and paste it into the podcast promoter. I can set the limit. Now, I could have set this for thousands, but basically what this does is you just hit the play button, and it will begin pulling down, all right, the people that have commented on the video. Now, this is a podcast, but if you go down here, there's 92,987 comments. Now, these are rabid fans of this podcast. Now, let's say that I wanted to do this for a specific author, a specific book. Any YouTube video that has comments, I can find those people by using the podcast promoter and reverse engineering them back to Twitter. All right, so that's what this system does, is it finds where they're at on Twitter, and then all we have to do is select them and follow on Twitter. So if you think about it, this has many, many different uses. Any type of YouTube video that has commenters, we can target those people using this system. Could be for authors, could be for speakers, could be for webinar attendees, all kinds of stuff that we can use with this YouTube commenter system. And of course, it works fantastic for promoting your podcast. Now, if you're running a podcast and you're just starting out, there's a lot of different things that you want to do. There's communities that you can join, and this tab will help you do it. If you obtain the email addresses of the people, you can email them through this system as well. But all in all, what this system does is it allows you to find highly specific audiences and download them into the software, follow them, connect, communicate, and target. Now, in our education on this product at mypodcastpromoter.com site, we'll be showing you the best ways to communicate with your target audience once you achieve it. Nobody has ever developed anything quite like this. There's all kinds of apps out there that'll follow keywords and stuff like that on Instagram or Twitter. This targets specific URLs, specific audiences downloads them so that you can have and keep the data, and then allows you to filter how many followers they have before you even connect, and also targets YouTube commenters. So all in all, what this does is it builds up the ability for you to be an influencer on any type of business subject you want. This is a huge breakthrough, and we're very proud to offer this. I hope you join us on the inside, and as always, I'd like to thank you for watching. We have this out in beta. It's only been out for a few days in beta, but we are beginning to sell it now. So I hope to see you on the inside.